As part of the winter jobs on the Ferrari 430, I've got to fit a new track rod end, so that's what we're going to cover on today's episode. So next thing we need to do is jack the car up. We've slackened the wheel bolts off because that's the first thing you've got to do. Now, strangely enough, the F430 doesn't really have a front jacking point. It does, but you can only really access it if you've got one of the low profile jacks. If you've got a normal trolley jack though, you can actually, because the chassis is so stiff, you can raise the back end of the car up and you can lift the front wheel off the ground. Now, I don't really recommend that you do it too much, but what I'm going to do is jack the back end up so that we can get a normal jack under the front. Then we're going to raise the front end up with another jack and get a jack stand under there. That way we can then take the wheel off nice and easy.
This is the rear jacking point. I'd recommend using a rubber pad or a hockey puck to ensure that the jack doesn't damage the car in any way. Starting at the back, jack the car up until the front wheel is no longer on the ground. Once you can get your second jack under the front, start to raise the front of the car up. Top tip, when working with trolley jacks, once you've got the car at the height you want it, remove the handles and put them by the side. This stops anyone accidentally tripping over them. Now remove the front wheel completely from the car, and, as I've told you before, don't lose it. Next, get your axle stand under where the wishbone is. This is a sturdy area and it's satisfactory for it to be placed.
Well, now we've got the wheel off, this is the track rod end that we need to attend to. There's a 10mm hex bolt in there. We've got to undo that. We've got to undo this lock nut. This is the track rod end. And this is the steering rack arm. So we've got to lock this, unlock this, take this off, take that out. Hopefully the whole thing will come out, put the new one on, and it'll be that easy. Of course it will. So one of the first things we need to do is spray some PTFE type lubricant on here to make sure that the threads move nice and easily. So we're going to spray that on, give it about 10 minutes or so to soak in. Then we're going to try and unlock this 22mm nut.
Using a breaker bar and a 10mm hex bit, you need to undo the bolt that holds the rod end to the hub. These can be tight and gummed up with road debris, so lots of lubricating fluid and work slowly.
Now, a little tip for you. If you're using something like this breaker bar and you're worried about hitting the bodywork, or you're just a bit paranoid, or you're working on an expensive car, or you just don't want to damage anything, a quick tip is, what you can do is if you get some of this pipe insulation, get your breaker bar, split it down the seam until you get to the length, and then what we can do is we can tear it round just like that. We get that then, pop it onto our breaker bar like that. We've got a nice padded breaker bar, which, although we don't want to, just in case we slip and we hit anything, it's not going to do as much damage. That's just a little tip for you there.
Once the bolt is loose enough, switch to a ratchet. You don't need to remove the bolt fully just yet. Next, we're going to undo the locking nut from the rod end. There are two ways to do this. If the nut is not seized, hold the steering arm with a 13mm spanner, then undo the 22mm locking nut. Once you've done that, retighten the 22mm locking nut until it touches the rod end. If you can't undo the 22mm nut, such as in my case, using both a 22mm spanner and a 13mm spanner, undo the whole assembly from the rod end. By keeping the lock nut in the same position, the tracking shouldn't need adjusting. It's probably worth getting it checked after fitting a track rod end, but this will be good enough to get you to a garage that can perform a tracking for you. Now remove the 10mm hex bolt. There's a spacer in there, ensure that it's clean and in good condition. Now you can remove the track rod end from the hub and unscrew it from the steering arm. There's actually no play in the old rod end, but it needs replacing because the boot has split and they no longer sell the boot on its own. However, I will be doing an autopsy on this rod end to see if it's in serviceable condition and to replace the boot. I'm going to apply some anti-seize to the thread of the steering arm to make sure it moves freely in the future. Then screw the new rod end up to the locking nut. I've also applied anti-seize to the hex head bolt too. The bolt is a bit fiddly and you have to push it into the corrugated spacer. Then line the thread up with the bottom of the hub. Just be careful not to cross thread it.
So now we've got the track rod reinstalled, what we need to do is torque up this hex bolt in the top. The manufacturer's setting is 65 Newton meters. So I've got my torque wrench all set up. All we need to do is pop it in there and there we go. And that's all we need to do to torque that up. Next thing we're going to do, just put a little mark on there just to say that that one is torqued up so we know for the future.
Whilst the wheel's off, it's also a good idea to check the condition of the brakes and any other suspension components.
So the last job we've got to do now is put the wheel back on. We need to check that this hub mounting face is all clean, clear and free from any sort of corrosion that's going to stop the wheel from sitting on. The main areas that you sort of get a corrosion build-up can be here around where the disc meets the hub. So you want to make sure that's nice and clean. There's already grease on here anyway, so we haven't got to add any extra, but if you do need to clean it up, obviously just use your wire brush and clean up all these surfaces just to make sure that the wheel sits on there nice and flat. I'm going to use these wheel hangers. They make life a lot easier to get the wheel on, and if you've got carbon ceramic discs, they are a must. You really do need these because when you take the wheels off, because they're heavy and put them back on, there's always a chance you could chip the disc, and that's not something you want to do with carbon ceramics. But on cars without, it also helps you to stop hitting the caliper or anything else that you don't want to. So they're just a useful little thing to have, and they come in a set of 2. You can either use 2 or 1 to put the wheel back on, whichever you find easier. So we're going to grab the wheel and lift it onto the hanger, and then all it does is slides nice and easily onto the hub. There we go. That'll hold it in place then. Take a 22mm socket, take one of our wheel bolts and put the first one in. We're going to follow that for the rest. I'm not going to tighten them up just yet though. Now remove the hanger. Fit the final bolt. There we go. Now what we're going to do is just tighten them up gently, not too tight. We don't want to torque them up just yet, but we're just going to tighten them up just to nip them up. Now we want to do top one first, and when we've done that we want to go down in a diagonal, do that one, up to this one, across, and then down to the bottom. If you've got a 4 stud pattern, you want to tighten them top, across, up and across, and that'll just then give you an even tightening. It doesn't matter too much at this stage, but it will when we're torquing the bolts off. So the next thing we need to do is lower the car down. Now what we're going to do is, because obviously we've got the whole thing with the 2 trolley jacks, I'm just going to move that out of the way. We've still got the jack stand underneath, so we're going to have to take that out now. So we want to raise the front jack up a little, just to take the weight off that jack stand. And then reach in, take the jack stand out. And what we're going to do is we're going to lower the front jack down, but not all the way. What we want to do is slowly and carefully release it down until it's about halfway, and then we'll stop that jack. We'll move to the back one. So we're lowering it down basically in a sort of front to back motion, so it goes down evenly. So you're going to let the back down a little bit. Okay. And then again, we're going to let the front jack down. Just nice and slowly. Make sure nothing's in the way of the wheels or bodywork, nothing that's going to foul or that the car's going to catch on. So now we've let the back down, we can let the front down really all the way. So there we go. That's the front jack released. Move that out of the way. And now we'll take the back jack down. And there we go, nice and easy, and that's how we lower the car. Now that the car is lowered, what we're going to do is tighten up these wheel bolts, and then we're going to torque them up afterwards. So same thing again, I'm going to go top one, and then one of the bottom ones, up and across, over, and then down to the bottom. Now what we're going to do is get our torque wrench, set it to the right torque setting for your wheels. You can generally find this either in your owner's manual, online, or in a workshop manual. Otherwise you can always phone the dealership and see if they'll tell you what it is. So now we're going to torque these bolts up. 100 Newton meters is the setting. So you guessed, it's the same procedure again. You're going to tighten the top, down, up and across, over, and down to the bottom. And then just for good measure, we'll check them one last time. There we go, that's all torqued up now. What we'll probably want to do is in around 20 to 50 miles, we'll recheck that the torque on these wheel bolts is still correct. So we're just going to, when we drive the car, when we bring it back, we'll just check that they are still torqued up to what they were, because sometimes you can get a bit of settling, and it's really cold at the moment, so you do get metals changing size and so on. So it's just worth checking them, and you can check them every now and again anyway. There's no harm in it, it's a nice little safety thing that you can do just for your own peace of mind. So the job wasn't that bad in the end. We managed to get everything done. We got the track rod replaced. Only little problem was that locking nut was seized, but I'm sure they'll get that free when they do the tracking on the car. So what we've done is, because we can fit the new track rod end up to the nut, the distance hasn't changed between where the new track rod end is and the old track rod end. So the tracking on the car, which is whether the wheels point inwards or outwards, that hasn't changed. So we're in a bit of a bonus situation, but I'm sure they'll manage to free that off when the car has its tracking done. But other than that, it was quite a straightforward job, and it's another one ticked off the winter list. So that's great now. We can take the car for a service and an MOT test without any worries. There was no play in that original track rod end anyway. It's just that the bush had split, and when the bush is split, because they're like a rose joint, the water and muck gets in there and it corrodes the rose joint. So that's why you do have to replace it. It's an unfortunate thing that you do have to buy an entire track rod end now. Ferrari did used to sell the boot separately, but they don't. So, you know, we've just got to fit the whole thing. I am going to do an autopsy, like I said before in the video, on that track rod end. We're going to strip it down, check all inside's got no corrosion. I've got a universal boot to put on there, but I do know that they are a bit of a pain to fit. So we're going to fit that on, and we'll get that done in another video. Then we can get back onto the detailing, hopefully, when the weather picks up. It's absolutely freezing and snowing and windy. If you've been wondering what that strange noise is in the background, that's the wind blowing through the doors. But yeah, so we've got another job ticked off the list. We can carry on now, take it for a service, and hopefully, fingers crossed, everything's going to go okay with that.
I do hope you found this video and the tips in it useful. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, tick subscribe to be notified when I upload new videos, and if you've got any of your own tips that you want to share, please leave them in the comments section below. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.